Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a genuinely fascinating question. Why didn't ancient humans wash their hands? I mean, when we picture our ancient ancestors, right, we usually imagine them living in just absolute filth. We picture them butchering animals, digging roots out of the mud, handling raw meat, and then going about their entire day without ever once reaching for a bar of soap. Honestly, it kind of seems like a total miracle that the human race survived at all, doesn't it? It's an irresistible hook, and it really forces us to ask, why didn't they wash? Without sinks, hand sanitizer, or, any understanding whatsoever of bacteria and viruses, how did they avoid dying immediately from infections? It's so easy for us modern humans to just assume that before the discovery of germ theory, everyone was helplessly wandering around covered in dangerous microbes, completely ignorant of hygiene. But when you actually look at the historical record, it points us in a totally different and, frankly, completely surprising direction.
And here is the massive plot twist. It turns out they actually did wash their hands. Seriously, they washed them a lot. Ancient humans were not filthy idiots. They were incredibly practical survivors. They just didn't wash their hands for the reasons we do today. Long before anyone knew what a microscopic cell was, humans had this powerful, hardwired evolutionary disgust reaction to rot, to blood, and especially to terrible smells. Think about it. If you got sticky animal fat or foul-smelling mud on your hands, your brain immediately told you it was gross and you wanted it off right away.
Section 1. Disgust, smells, and miasma. So in a world completely devoid of microscopes, how did people even understand contamination? Well, before germ theory came along, the dominant explanation for infectious disease across a huge chunk of the globe was miasma theory, championed by famous figures like Hippocrates in ancient Greece and similarly documented by medical scholars over in ancient China. This theory argued that diseases were caused by poisonous vapors, or foul-smelling bad air. To the ancient mind, the bad smell didn't just indicate disease, the bad smell essentially was the disease. This meant that washing actually had a very logical foundation. You washed to remove bad smells, which then removed the bad air, which in turn protected your health. The connection was purely atmospheric, rather than biological.
And honestly, this just brilliantly illustrates the resourcefulness of early humans. Take a look at this ancient cleaning arsenal. Sure, they didn't have modern automatic soap dispensers, but they used flowing river water and abrasive sand to literally scrub away mud and blood. They used fire ash, which, get this, actually reacts with fats to scrub away grease. Ancient Egyptians even whipped up a paste made entirely of plant ash and animal fat. And then you have the Romans. They used these bronze scrapers called strigils to violently scrape a mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt right off their skin after a workout. We even have a Babylonian clay tablet dating all the way back to around 2800 BCE with a recipe for early soap made of water, alkali, and cassia oil. So they were absolutely cleaning themselves, they just weren't targeting invisible germs.
Section 2. Ritual purity and religion.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it actually wasn't science that created the most consistent hand hygiene programs in human history, it was religion. Just look at how these massive cultural traditions codified hand washing into everyday life. The Islamic tradition of tahara requires wudu, right? That's ritual ablution involving washing the hands, face, and feet before prayer. Jewish law dictates specific hand washing for ritual impurity, known as tuma, like before eating or after handling a corpse. And ancient Egyptians bathed daily and shaved their body hair to please the gods and prepare for the afterlife's judgment. The practitioners didn't view these acts as germ prevention at all. To them, they were strictly maintaining a state of spiritual readiness.
But here's the kicker. The biological result was exactly the same. We call this accidental hygiene. By routinely washing their hands before meals for religious reasons or even just social decorum, these ancient cultures were accidentally interrupting what we now know as the fecal-oral transmission route. They were successfully fighting off deadly gastrointestinal pathogens like cholera and typhoid, completely unaware of the invisible biological mechanics that were literally saving their lives every single day.
Section 3. The accidental hygiene paradox. However, not actually knowing those biological mechanics can sometimes lead to absolute disaster. Just look at the ancient Romans. They built these incredible aqueducts and massive public bathhouses with heated water. I mean, it was an engineering marvel for personal cleanliness. But there's a pretty grim biological reality lurking in the water. Because they didn't understand microorganisms, they didn't realize that shared communal warm water is basically a perfect incubator for fungal infections and waterborne parasites. On top of that, Roman cities collected human waste and often used it to fertilize crops. Modern science tells us that unless human waste is thoroughly composted for many months, using it as fertilizer just spreads viable parasite eggs everywhere. And the historical record totally backs this up. Archaeologists have found that parasites like whipworm and roundworm actually increased during Roman times, despite their incredible, world-famous sanitation technologies.
But despite these paradoxes, some ancient tools were flawlessly executing biological warfare entirely under the radar. Take the invisible chemistry of ancient soap. Soap molecules are remarkably elegant. They have a fat-attracting tail that attaches itself directly to the lipid envelope of a pathogen, like a virus or bacteria. Then the water-attracting head of the molecule allows the whole complex to just be rinsed away safely. Think about how wild that is for a second. Ancient people, making soap out of leftover ash and animal fat, were mechanically destroying viruses centuries before humanity even knew what a cell was.
Section 4. The Germ Theory Revolution. So when did we actually finally figure it all out? Well, the transition from miasmas to microbes was not smooth. In fact, it was incredibly painful. Back in 1846, Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian doctor working over in Vienna, noticed that women in his hospital were dying of fevers at super high rates after being treated by doctors who had literally just performed autopsies. He mandated hand washing with chlorine, and guess what? Death rates plummeted. But other doctors were furious. They completely rejected his findings because the implication was that they, the esteemed doctors, were the ones killing their patients. Then, jump to 1854, Florence Nightingale implemented strict hand-washing and hygiene in Crimean war hospitals. Now, she was actually still trying to fight foul-smelling miasmas, but her methods accidentally reduced bacterial infections anyway. It wasn't until the 1860s that Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister firmly established germ theory and antiseptic surgery. And incredibly, this blows my mind, it wasn't until the 1980s that the US CDC issued its first nationally endorsed hand hygiene guidelines. So the crucial point is this: medical evidence is often rejected if it makes people psychologically or professionally uncomfortable. Changing human behavior takes far, far more than just introducing a bunch of new facts.
And that behavioral challenge definitely extends to physical infrastructure today. 2 billion. Right now, in the modern era, an estimated 2 billion people globally still lack access to basic hand-washing facilities with soap and water. For a massive portion of the planet, the barrier to hand-washing isn't a lack of scientific knowledge. It's a lack of running water and soap. Just like the medieval populations whose hygiene severely declined after the Roman aqueducts collapsed, you simply can't wash your hands if you don't have the tools to do it.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought. If knowledge isn't enough to change behavior, what is? I mean, even in modern hospitals, where doctors know exactly what germs are and where signs are plastered everywhere, hand hygiene compliance can sometimes dip below 60%. Ancient people washed their hands because of their social context, strict religious laws, and available infrastructure. Today, we have all the scientific facts in the world, but human behavior proves that we are still driven mostly by our immediate environment and our social routines. The science is completely settled, but building the habits and the infrastructure to actually support them, well, that remains one of our greatest ongoing human challenges.